Some people don't announce themselves. They arrive, and the room recalibrates. No introduction, no performance, just a shift in gravity that everyone feels and nobody can fully explain. Now think about the people you've forgotten, the ones who were always talking, always posting, always explaining themselves. Where are they now? Noise fades. It always does. Here's what nobody tells you about power. The most influential people in the world didn't get there by being constantly available. They got there by being strategically scarce. They understood something most people will never grasp, that presence is not about being everywhere. It's about being felt even when you're nowhere. There is a hidden architecture to influence, a rhythm, and the ones who master it don't chase attention. They withdraw it. They disappear, deliberately, calculatedly, and when they return, the world leans in. This is not about being mysterious for the sake of it. It's not a performance. It's a deep, centuries-old understanding of human psychology. How scarcity creates desire, how silence builds weight, and how the person who controls the rhythm of a relationship controls the relationship itself. What you're about to learn has been practiced by emperors, billionaires, artists, and strategists, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Before we go any further, if you've ever felt invisible despite doing everything right, comment "I'm ready" below. You're not alone, and this changes today. Let's start with something uncomfortable. Think about the last time you over-explained yourself. Maybe it was at work. Someone questioned your decision and you launched into a 5-minute defense when a single sentence would have done the job. Maybe it was in a relationship where you felt the need to justify every move, every feeling, every choice. Maybe it's your social media presence where you're posting constantly, refreshing for reactions, measuring your worth in engagement numbers. Here's the hard truth. Every time you do that, you are bleeding authority. Slowly, quietly, invisibly, but it's happening. And most people have absolutely no idea. We live in a culture that has sold you a dangerous lie. The lie goes something like this: the more visible you are, the more powerful you become. Post more, show up more, be more accessible. Build your personal brand by being everywhere at once. Hustle culture has dressed this up as virtue, as ambition, as the price of success. And millions of people are paying that price, not in time or energy alone, but in the one currency that cannot be recovered once spent: perceived value. When you are everywhere, you are worth nothing. Not because you lack talent, not because you lack effort, but because the human brain is wired to devalue what is abundant and crave what is scarce. This is not a moral judgment. It is psychology. It is biology. And it is working against you every single day that you refuse to acknowledge it. Think about water. You don't think twice about turning on a tap. You don't treasure each drop. But put someone in a desert, and suddenly water becomes the most valuable thing in the world. The water hasn't changed. The scarcity has. And scarcity, real or manufactured, changes everything about how we perceive value. You are doing the equivalent of flooding the desert. You are making yourself so available, so present, so constantly accessible that people have stopped noticing you're even there. Your opinions come so frequently that they've lost their weight. Your presence is so expected that your absence would barely register. That is not power, that is wallpaper. Now here's where it gets more specific and more personal. Because the visibility trap doesn't just apply to social media or personal branding, it shows up in your relationships, your professional dynamics, and the quiet internal story you tell yourself about what it means to be productive or relevant. At work, the person who responds to every email within 60 seconds, who volunteers for every meeting, who is always available for every question, that person is not seen as indispensable. They are seen as on call. And there is a critical difference between someone who is indispensable and someone who is on call. One commands, the other serves. The line between them is often just a matter of strategic restraint. Think about the managers and executives you've encountered who carried real authority. The ones who made you feel like getting 10 minutes of their time actually meant something. Chances are they weren't the ones who were constantly in the hallway, constantly in your inbox, constantly making themselves the center of every conversation. They had a certain gravitational pull, and that pull came precisely from the fact that they were not always there. In relationships, romantic, social, professional, the same principle operates. The person who is always available, always initiating, always eager to respond, always first to reach out. They shift the balance of the dynamic. Not intentionally, not maliciously, but they do. They hand over the emotional leverage. They become the pursuer. And in any dynamic, the one who wants less holds more power. Not because wanting is wrong, but because demonstrating need erodes standing. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from being always on. You know it, that low-grade mental fatigue from performing constantly, from managing how you're perceived at every moment, from the relentless pressure to produce, to respond, to be visible and relevant and engaging. It wears you down in ways that are hard to articulate, because the culture tells you this tiredness is just the cost of ambition. But what if it's not ambition at all? What if it's insecurity wearing ambition's clothes? What if the compulsion to be constantly visible, to always be posting, always be available, always be explaining and justifying and performing, is not a strategy but a symptom? A symptom of a deeper fear. The fear that if you stop, if you go quiet, if you step back even for a moment, you will be forgotten. That fear is understandable. It is also, if left unexamined, one of the most self-destructive forces in your professional and personal life. Because here is what actually happens when powerful people go quiet, when they stop explaining themselves, when they pull back from the constant performance of visibility. The people around them don't forget them. They start thinking about them more. The absence creates a question, and questions create curiosity. And curiosity, genuine, unforced curiosity, is one of the most potent forms of influence that exists. You cannot manufacture curiosity with more noise. You cannot build anticipation with constant availability. You cannot create desire with abundance. These things work in reverse. And once you truly understand that, the constant pressure to perform starts to feel less like ambition and more like what it really is: a trap. The visibility trap is real. It is pervasive. And the first step out of it is not a strategy or a tactic. It's a shift in understanding. A recognition that the game is not about volume. It never was. The game is about weight, about meaning, about the kind of presence that lingers after you leave the room, not because you dominated it, but because you were deliberate in it. That deliberateness, that control of your own rhythm, is exactly what the most powerful people in history understood better than anyone else. And it's what we're going to examine next. The psychology of absence. Why the brain craves what it can't have. There is a moment most people have experienced, but few have stopped to analyze. You're talking to someone you find interesting, engaging, even magnetic. And then they become less available. Maybe they take longer to respond. Maybe they cancel plans. Maybe they just seem a little more distant than they were before. And almost against your will, you find yourself thinking about them more, not less, more. This is not a coincidence. It is not weakness on your part. It is the human brain operating exactly as it was designed to. And understanding why it works this way is the key to everything that follows. Robert Cialdini, in his foundational work on the psychology of influence, identified scarcity as one of the most powerful drivers of human behavior. The principle is simple. We assign greater value to things that are less available. This is not a cognitive error. It is an evolved heuristic, a mental shortcut that, for most of human history, served us well. Rare things were often genuinely more valuable. Scarce resources were worth fighting for. The brain learned to equate hard to get with worth having. The problem, or the opportunity, depending on how you look at it, is that this principle doesn't stop at food or water or physical resources. It extends directly into the social realm, into relationships, into influence, into the way we perceive people. When someone becomes less available, the brain doesn't automatically conclude that they're less important. Quite the opposite. It often concludes they must be more important. Why else would they be so hard to reach? This is the scarcity principle at work in human dynamics, and it explains something that confuses a lot of people. Why pulling back, even slightly, even temporarily, so often results in the other person leaning in. But scarcity is only one piece of the psychological puzzle. There is a second principle at play, and it's even more fascinating. Psychologists call it reactance. The theory, developed by Jack Brame in the 1960s, proposes that when people feel their freedom to access something is being restricted or threatened, they experience a sharp increase in desire for that thing, not a mild increase, a sharp one. Think about what happens when a book gets banned, or a product gets limited, or a restaurant has a 3-month wait list. The restriction itself becomes a form of advertising. People who might never have been interested suddenly become intensely interested, not because the thing has changed, but because the access to it has changed. The brain interprets restriction as a signal of value, and it responds accordingly. Apply this to personal dynamics, and the implications are significant. When you're always available, you are communicating, without words, without intention, that your time and attention carry no premium. There is no wait list, there is no restriction. And therefore, for the brain that runs on these ancient heuristics, there is no particular urgency to value what you offer. Now consider the person who is not always available, who doesn't respond immediately to every message, who doesn't volunteer their opinion in every meeting, who creates, through their behavior, a kind of invisible waitlist. The brain of everyone around them begins to process that scarcity signal, and whether those people are conscious of it or not, their valuation of that person begins to rise. There is a third psychological mechanism worth understanding here, and it may be the most counterintuitive of all. It has to do with the imagination, and specifically with how the brain fills in the blanks when information is withheld. When you overshare, when you explain every decision, document every step, broadcast every thought, you leave nothing to the imagination. And the imagination, it turns out, is one of the most powerful tools of influence that exists. Not your imagination. Theirs. The imagination of the people watching you, working with you, following you. When you give them everything, they have nothing to imagine. When you give them something and deliberately leave out the rest, their minds go to work, and the stories they construct are almost always more compelling than the truth you would have given them. This is why the most magnetic people in any room are rarely the ones talking the most. They offer glimpses, fragments, enough to spark curiosity, never enough to satisfy it. And that unsatisfied curiosity keeps people returning, keeps people wondering, keeps people engaged in a way that no amount of oversharing ever could. There is also the matter of what psychologists call intermittent reinforcement. And if you want to understand why some people seem to command almost compulsive attention from those around them, this is the mechanism to understand. Intermittent reinforcement is the principle that rewards delivered unpredictably create stronger behavioral responses than rewards delivered consistently. It's the same principle that makes slot machines more psychologically compelling than vending machines. The vending machine gives you what you want every time: predictable, reliable, satisfying, and completely unaddictive. The slot machine gives you what you want sometimes, unpredictably, intermittently. And that unpredictability is precisely what makes it so difficult to walk away from. Now apply that to human behavior. The person who is consistently warm, consistently available, consistently responsive, creates a comfortable dynamic, but not a compelling one. The person who is sometimes warm and sometimes distant, sometimes available and sometimes not, sometimes generous with their attention and sometimes withdrawn, that person creates something far more psychologically gripping. People work harder for their attention. People notice when it's withheld. People feel the reward more intensely when it's received. This is not a prescription for cruelty or emotional manipulation. It's a description of how human psychology actually operates in the wild, without anyone orchestrating it. The most naturally charismatic people in the world often do this intuitively, without ever having read a book about influence or strategy. They just happen to be busy or private or genuinely selective with their attention. And that selectivity, that natural scarcity, is a large part of what makes them so compelling. What this video is asking you to do is to understand these mechanisms clearly enough that you can make conscious choices about how you show up, rather than defaulting to the cultural pressure of constant visibility without ever examining what it's actually costing you. The brain craves what it cannot fully have. It values what is rare. It leans toward what is slightly out of reach. These are not flaws in human cognition. They are deep, ancient features of the way we process the social world. And the person who understands them, who can work with these currents rather than against them, holds a form of power that most people will spend their entire lives chasing without ever understanding why it keeps eluding them. This is the psychology. Now let's look at the history, because this is not a new discovery. The greatest power players in human history understood every single one of these principles. They just called it by different names. The historical blueprint: how power has always used disappearance. History does not remember the loudest people. It remembers the most deliberate ones. And when you look closely at the figures who shaped empires, industries, and entire cultural movements, a pattern emerges that is impossible to ignore. The most powerful among them were masters of timing, masters of withdrawal, and masters of their own visibility. Start with Napoleon Bonaparte. Most people think of Napoleon as a man of action, bold, visible, constantly on the move. And he was. But what made Napoleon extraordinary was not just his military genius. It was his understanding of perception. Napoleon was one of the first modern leaders to consciously manage his public image with strategic precision. He rationed his public appearances. He controlled the narrative around his presence. He understood that an emperor who was everywhere was an emperor who could be taken for granted. And Napoleon was not a man who tolerated being taken for granted. When Napoleon entered a room, the effect was deliberate. His entrances were engineered. His silences during meetings were calculated. He had observed that when he stopped speaking, his generals leaned in, filled the silence with their own anxieties, and often gave him exactly the information or concession he was looking for. He once wrote that the most powerful thing a leader could do was make others wait, not out of arrogance, out of strategy. The wait communicated value. The wait created anticipation, and anticipation, Napoleon understood, was halfway to surrender. Move forward a century and look at Howard Hughes, a figure whose legend was built almost entirely on absence. Hughes was, in his early years, one of the most visible men in America. Aviator, filmmaker, industrialist, playboy. The press adored him. The public was fascinated. And then, gradually, he withdrew. First from the public eye, then from society entirely. By the later years of his life, Hughes had become completely reclusive. And paradoxically, his fame had never been greater. The mystery of Howard Hughes became one of the most compelling stories in American culture. Now Hughes's withdrawal was not entirely strategic. It was entangled with serious personal struggles. But the cultural effect was instructive. His disappearance did not diminish his influence. It amplified it. People speculated endlessly about what he was doing, what he was planning, what he knew. The absence created a void, and the public imagination filled that void with something far more fascinating than the truth could ever have been. Steve Jobs understood this perhaps better than anyone in the modern era. Apple's product launches under Jobs were masterclasses in strategic scarcity. The company was famously secretive, not just for competitive reasons, but for psychological ones. The silence before a launch created a cultural pressure that advertising budgets could never replicate. When Jobs finally took the stage, the room was already leaning forward. The desire had already been engineered, not through more communication, but through less. Jobs himself was personally selective with his time and attention in ways that were almost theatrical. He was not accessible. He was not available to everyone. And the people who did get access to him, who did get his time, his feedback, his presence, treated it as something genuinely rare and valuable, because it was. He had made it so, not by accident, but by design. In the world of entertainment, few examples are as instructive as Greta Garbo. At the peak of her fame, when she was arguably the most celebrated actress in the world, Garbo withdrew from public life almost entirely. She stopped giving interviews. She avoided events. She moved through the world in a way that kept her perpetually out of reach, and the public, deprived of access, became obsessed. Her line, "I want to be alone," became one of the most famous phrases of the 20th century, not despite her withdrawal, because of it. The contrast is instructive. Think about the celebrities today who are constantly available, whose every meal, every workout, every opinion, every emotional moment is documented and broadcast in real time. Do you feel the same intensity of fascination for them that audiences felt for Garbo? Almost certainly not. Familiarity, as the saying goes, breeds contempt. Or at the very least, it breeds indifference. And indifference is the death of influence. Robert Greene, in the 48 Laws of Power, dedicates an entire law to this principle. Law 16, use absence to increase respect and honor. Greene draws on the example of Deioces, a judge in ancient media who became so famous for his wisdom and fairness that people came from everywhere to seek his counsel. And then one day, he simply stopped. He withdrew from public life and refused to judge any more cases. The people, suddenly deprived of what they had come to depend on, were thrown into chaos. They petitioned him, they begged him, and when he finally agreed to return, it was as their king. His absence had transformed him from a respected judge into an indispensable ruler. The underlying principle is ancient. In Sun Tzu's The Art of War, control of tempo is identified as one of the decisive factors in military strategy. The general who dictates when the battle happens, when it pauses, and when it resumes, holds a fundamental advantage over the general who is simply reacting. The same is true in every other domain of power. The person who controls the rhythm, who decides when they are present and when they are not, is the one who holds the initiative. Everyone else is simply responding. Even in Eastern philosophy, this idea has deep roots. Lao Tzu's concept of Wu Wei, often translated as non-action or effortless action, is not about passivity. It is about the power of knowing when not to act, when not to speak, when not to push. The Tao Te Ching is full of paradoxes that sound like weakness and reveal themselves as profound strategy. The soft overcomes the hard, the gentle overcomes the rigid, the yielding, the withdrawing, the quiet. These are not failures of nerve, they are expressions of deep strategic intelligence. What all of these figures, from Napoleon to Jobs, from Garbo to the ancient strategists, have in common is a refusal to be controlled by the hunger for attention. They each, in their own way, understood that the need to be seen is a vulnerability, that the moment you are chasing attention rather than calibrating it, you have surrendered the most important thing a powerful person can possess, the initiative. They also understood something about human nature that is easy to forget in a world of constant broadcasting. People are not actually interested in what is always there. They are interested in what might not be there tomorrow, what is earned, what is rare, what has to be paid attention to, because if you look away, you might miss it. That is the blueprint. Centuries of evidence across cultures and disciplines pointing to the same conclusion. The deliberate management of your presence is not a soft skill or a psychological trick. It is one of the foundational competencies of sustained power. And the people who fail to develop it, who let the culture of noise dictate their behavior, are not failing at the game. They never realized it was being played. But understanding the history is one thing. Feeling the weight of what overexposure actually costs, in your real life, in your real relationships, in your real career, is something else entirely. That's where we go next. The agitation. What overexposure actually destroys. Let's get specific, because everything up to this point has been philosophical, and philosophy, as satisfying as it is, doesn't sting the way truth does when it gets personal. So let's make this personal. Think about someone in your life, at work, in your social circle, or even from your past, who used to command your respect. Someone whose opinion mattered to you, someone you looked up to, or at least looked at with genuine interest. And then, gradually, that respect eroded. Not because they did anything dramatic, not because they failed or fell from grace in some obvious way, but because over time they just became too much, too available, too eager, too willing to share every thought, every feeling, every update. And slowly, so slowly you barely noticed, the weight of their words began to lighten, until one day you realized you had stopped really listening. That erosion has a name. Psychologists call it hedonic adaptation, the tendency of human beings to return to a relatively stable level of emotional response, even after significant positive or negative events. In simpler terms, we get used to things, we normalize them, we stop feeling them. And once something stops generating feeling, it stops generating attention. This is what overexposure actually destroys, not your reputation in some dramatic, visible way, but the emotional response you produce in others. And once that emotional response is gone, rebuilding it is one of the hardest things in the world to do. because you can't unnormalize yourself in someone's eyes simply by trying harder. Trying harder just produces more of the same, more presence, more noise, more of the very thing that caused the problem in the first place. In professional settings, overexposure takes on a particular texture that's worth examining closely. There is a category of professional, you've met them, who is always the first to speak in meetings, who offers an opinion on everything, whether or not they have expertise or standing, who sends follow-up emails before the original email has been read, who makes themselves visible in every possible channel, every possible forum, every possible interaction. And they do it because they believe that visibility equals opportunity, that the more they are seen, the more they will be considered. What actually happens is the opposite. The people making real decisions, the ones with genuine authority, learn to mentally filter out the constant presence. The always-on professional becomes background noise, and background noise is never promoted. Background noise is never sought out for counsel. Background noise is appreciated when it's useful and ignored the rest of the time. Meanwhile, the professional who speaks rarely, but when they do speak, says something worth hearing, becomes something entirely different in the imagination of the room. They become someone whose words carry weight because they are not diluted by volume. Every time they open their mouth, people pay attention because experience has taught them that this person does not speak without purpose. There is also the ego dimension, and this is where things get genuinely uncomfortable, because it requires a degree of self-honesty that most people find difficult. The compulsion to be constantly visible, to constantly share, to constantly perform, is very often driven by ego, not the healthy kind of confidence that comes from genuine self-assurance, the fragile kind, the kind that needs external validation to feel real, the kind that cannot tolerate the silence of not being noticed, because the silence feels too much like not mattering. And here's the terrible irony: the ego-driven need to be constantly seen is precisely what makes you less worth seeing. The desperation, even when it's invisible to you, even when you've convinced yourself it's just ambition or enthusiasm or generosity, is legible to others. People sense neediness. They may not be able to articulate it, but they feel it. And neediness, regardless of how it's packaged, repels the very thing it's chasing. Overexposure also destroys something more intimate: mystery. And mystery in any relationship is not a luxury. It is a form of ongoing invitation. It is the thing that keeps people curious about you, returning to you, wondering about you. The moment you have fully explained yourself, your motivations, your fears, your processes, your history, your opinions on everything, you have closed the door on curiosity, and a relationship with no curiosity in it is a relationship that has begun to die, whether anyone has admitted it yet or not. Think about the most compelling people you've ever met, the ones who lingered in your mind long after the conversation ended. Were they the ones who told you everything about themselves? Or were they the ones who left you with questions? Who offered enough to fascinate but held back enough to intrigue? The answer, if you're honest, is almost always the latter. There is a final dimension of overexposure that rarely gets discussed because it is internal rather than external. And that is what constant visibility does to you. Not to your reputation, to your inner life. When you are always performing, always managing your image, always calibrating how you're coming across, you lose access to the quieter, deeper parts of yourself. The parts that think slowly, that notice things, that generate the ideas and insights and perspectives that actually make you worth listening to in the first place. The constant demand for output, for posts, for responses, for opinions, for presence, hollows you out over time. and the hollowed-out version of you has less and less to offer, which leads to more frantic performance, which leads to more hollowing. It is a cycle, and the only exit from it is the thing the cycle is designed to prevent: stillness. Overexposure doesn't just damage how others perceive you, it damages how you perceive yourself. It replaces depth with performance, wisdom with noise, presence with busyness. And by the time most people realize what they've lost, they've been so long in the performance that they've forgotten what they were performing in place of. This is the cost, real, specific, and deeply personal. And once you've felt the weight of it, once you understand not just intellectually but viscerally what is at stake, the strategy that comes next doesn't feel like a technique. It feels like oxygen. The strategy: how to disappear with intention. Now we get to the part that matters most, because understanding the problem, understanding the psychology, understanding the history, all of that is valuable. But what you actually do with that understanding is what separates the people who nod along with good ideas from the people who transform because of them. Strategic disappearance is not about vanishing. It is not about being cold or withholding or playing games with people's emotions. It is about something far more elegant and far more sustainable: calibrating your presence to match your intention. Deciding consciously, deliberately, when you show up and how, rather than defaulting to the cultural pressure of constant availability. The first and most fundamental shift is what you might call the discipline of restraint in communication. This is simpler than it sounds and harder than it looks. It starts with a single question you learn to ask before you speak, post, respond, or share. Does this add weight or does this add noise? Not every thought deserves to be spoken. Not every feeling deserves to be broadcast. Not every opinion deserves a platform, and learning to sit with that distinction, to feel the impulse to share and then consciously evaluate it, is the beginning of real communicative power. This doesn't mean you become a sphinx. It doesn't mean you stop communicating. It means you become intentional about what you put into the world under your name, in your voice, with your presence. The goal is not less. It's better. Fewer words that carry more weight. Less frequency, more impact. And the first time you hold something back that you would previously have shared automatically, and you feel the faint discomfort of that restraint. That discomfort is exactly where your power begins to grow. The second strategy is what could be called strategic pausing. In conversations, particularly high-stakes ones, the pause is one of the most underestimated tools available to you. Most people are deeply uncomfortable with silence. They rush to fill it. They interpret a pause as confusion or discomfort or weakness. And that discomfort is your leverage. When you learn to pause before responding, genuinely, not performatively, several things happen simultaneously. You think more clearly, you project more authority, and you force the other person to sit in the silence they are already trying to escape, which often leads them to give you far more than they intended. Negotiators understand this. Therapists understand this. Great interviewers understand this. The pause is not dead air. It is an active force. It communicates that you are not in a hurry, that you are not anxious, that your thoughts, when they come, will be worth waiting for. And people who are not in a hurry, who are not anxious, who seem completely at ease with the weight of a moment, are people who appear to be in control of something, even when the only thing they are controlling is their own breath. The third strategy involves deliberately engineering windows of absence in your professional and personal life. This is not about disappearing to be dramatic. It is about creating natural rhythms of presence and absence that prevent the normalization that kills influence. Practically, this might look like being less immediately responsive in your communications. Not rude, not negligent, but not instantaneous either. It might mean being selective about which events, meetings, and social occasions you attend. It might mean periods where you go quieter on social platforms or in your professional community before a deliberate and well-timed return. The key word in all of this is deliberate. The difference between someone who seems unreliable and someone who seems powerful is not actually about how available they are. It is about whether their availability appears to be chosen. When your absence seems accidental or avoidant, it reads as weakness. When it reads as, "This person has priorities and I am not at the top of all of them right now," that is when it begins to generate the right kind of attention. The fourth strategy is about thinking in moves rather than moments. This is the shift from reactive to strategic, from responding to what is immediately in front of you to making decisions based on where you want to be 3 steps ahead. This is what separates the person who is perpetually caught in the current from the person who is quietly navigating the current toward a destination. In practice, this means asking different questions before you act. Not, "What does this moment require?" but "What does the outcome I want require?" Not, "What will make me look good right now?" but "What will create the conditions I need 6 months from now?" Thinking in moves means understanding that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do in this moment is nothing, because nothing right now is setting up something significant later. Chess players understand this implicitly. The amateur plays the move that looks best right now. The expert plays the move that creates the best position 3 turns from now, even if the immediate move looks passive or even weak. The same logic applies in every domain of influence. The person who always responds, always reacts, always takes the bait, they are playing the immediate game. And the immediate game is almost never the one that matters. The fifth strategy, and perhaps the most personally challenging one, is managing the ego's need for validation. Because all of the tactical strategies in the world collapse if the underlying driver is still the hungry, anxious need to be seen and acknowledged. Strategic restraint requires a settled sense of your own value that does not depend on external confirmation at every turn. This is not something that happens overnight. It is a practice. It is built through the accumulation of small moments where you choose not to seek the approval that is available to you, where you hold back the joke, the comment, the post, the justification, and discover that you did not need the validation after all, that the world did not end, that you are still intact. And gradually, through those small victories over the ego's hunger, you build something that cannot be manufactured any other way. Genuine psychological security. And psychological security, the real unperformed kind, is the most attractive quality a person can have. It is the thing that makes some people seem larger than the room they're in, not because they are performing confidence, but because they have genuinely stopped needing the room's approval, and the room, sensing that, adjusts itself accordingly. Finally, there is the question of what you do in the space that absence creates. Because strategic disappearance is not emptiness. It is not about removing yourself from the game and simply waiting. The most powerful version of this strategy is one where your withdrawals are periods of genuine investment in your thinking, your skills, your vision, your work, so that when you return with something. Not just presence, but substance. Not just attention, but something worth paying attention to. The musician who disappears for 2 years and comes back with the album of their career. The executive who steps back from public commentary and re-emerges with a strategy that reshapes an industry. The person in your life who goes quiet for a season, and when they speak again, you realize they've been thinking deeply about something the whole time. That is the full expression of this strategy. Not absence for its own sake, absence in service of becoming. The return, done right, is more powerful than any amount of constant presence could ever be, but only if you've used the time well, only if you've built something worth coming back with. That is the final piece, and it is where everything that came before leads. The return, how to come back and command the room. Everything up to this point has been about what happens before the return, the psychology, the strategy, the deliberate withdrawal, the internal work. But the return itself is an art form, and it is the part most people get wrong, even when they've done everything else right. Because you can disappear perfectly and still come back poorly. You can build anticipation flawlessly and then squander it with a return that is too loud, too eager, too much of a performance. The return is not the moment to exhale and release everything you've been holding. It is the moment to be more deliberate than ever. The first principle of the return is understatement. When you come back, whether from a period of professional silence, a social withdrawal, a creative retreat, or a deliberate step back from any dynamic, the instinct is often to make it count, to announce, to demonstrate that you've been doing important things and thinking important thoughts, and that the wait was worth it. Resist this instinct completely. The most powerful returns are quiet ones. They announce themselves through presence, not proclamation. Think about the person who has been absent from a social group for a few months, and when they reappear, they don't make a speech about where they've been. They simply show up, a little sharper, a little more grounded, a little more interesting than before, and let the room notice on its own terms. That subtlety is far more powerful than any announcement could be. It lets people arrive at their own conclusions about your significance. And the conclusions people arrive at themselves are always more deeply held than the ones you hand them. The second principle is re-entry through action, not explanation. When you return to a professional context, after stepping back from a project, a role, a platform, or a visibility cycle, the return should be characterized by doing, not by describing what you were doing while you were away. Explanation dilutes, action demonstrates. If you've used your time of absence to develop a genuine insight, to build something real, to think through something important, let that thing speak. Don't narrate it. Don't announce it. Produce it. This is one of the most consistent patterns among the most effective returns in business and creative life. The 2 years of silence followed by an extraordinary body of work. The period of public withdrawal followed by a strategic move that redefines the landscape. Nobody needed to explain what they'd been doing. The result explained itself. And the result, delivered without preamble or self-congratulation, carried a weight that would have been impossible to manufacture through any amount of steady, visible output. The third principle involves reading the room that your absence has created. Because when you return, you are not returning to the same dynamic you left. Your absence has changed things. It has changed how people think about you, what they expect from you, how they position you in the mental hierarchy of people who matter. If your withdrawal was well executed, that positioning has likely improved. People have had the space to miss what you offered, to wonder about you, to construct a version of you in their imagination that may be more compelling than you were before you left. Your job when you return is not to shatter that mental image with something disappointing. It is to meet it, or better still, to exceed it. This requires a degree of self-awareness and social attunement that many people skip over in their eagerness to reconnect or re-establish presence. Before you speak, listen. Before you act, observe. Before you reassert your position, understand the position that has formed in your absence. Because the gap between what they imagined and what you deliver is either the thing that solidifies your authority or the thing that deflates it. There is also the relational dimension of the return, and this is where emotional intelligence becomes indispensable. People may have feelings about your absence. They may have questions. They may have missed you or resented the gap or filled the space with someone or something else. A well-executed return acknowledges this without over-explaining or apologizing. Not, "I'm so sorry I was away," which is weak. Not, "I've been incredibly busy and important," which is defensive. Simply a quality of presence that communicates, "I'm here now, fully, let's continue." The most powerful people in any room do not carry debt about where they've been. They don't walk back in apologetically, as though they owe an explanation for having lived their lives with intention. They return with the quiet confidence of someone who made a choice, did what they needed to do, and is now prepared to fully engage. That absence of apology, that absence of justification, is itself a signal of authority. It says, "My time is managed by me, and I have chosen to give it to you now." There is a broader dimension to this as well, one that extends beyond any single return, any single dynamic, any single relationship or professional context. It is the long game of reputation through rhythm. The most enduring reputations, the ones that survive decades, industries, and cultural shifts, are built not on constant output, but on a consistent pattern of meaningful intervention. The person who speaks when it matters, who shows up when it counts, who disappears when the work requires it and returns when the work is ready to be seen. That reputation, built over time, becomes something that precedes you into every room. It is the reputation of someone who does not waste people's time, whose presence means something, whose silence means something, who has, through consistent demonstration, trained the people around them to pay attention when they show up. Because when they show up, it is always for a reason. This is the fullest expression of everything this video has been building toward. Not a trick, not a manipulation, but a complete philosophy of presence. One that treats your time, your attention, your visibility, and your voice as finite, valuable resources that deserve to be managed with the same care and intention you would give to anything else you genuinely value. The world is louder than it has ever been. The pressure to be visible, to be available, to be constantly producing and performing and explaining is more intense than at any other point in human history. And in that environment, the person who understands the power of deliberate absence is not just different. They are rare. And rarity, as we have established, is the beginning of all real value. Powerful people don't disappear because they are afraid. They disappear because they understand something most people never will, that the room remembers you longer when you leave it well than when you refuse to leave it at all. That silence, chosen deliberately, is one of the loudest things a person can do, and that the most powerful presence you can have in any room, any relationship, any industry, any moment in time, is the kind that people feel even when you are nowhere to be found. Step back, go quiet, do the work, and when you return, return with something worth the wait. Most people will watch this, nod, and go right back to the noise. Don't be most people. The ones who actually change, who build the kind of presence that lingers, that commands, that endures, they make a decision in a moment exactly like this one. So make it. Leave a comment below. I disappear with intention. Say it and mean it. Then subscribe to the Stoic mode and turn on notifications, because this community is being built for the ones who are done performing and ready to become. We are only getting started. Thank you for listening. Choose depth over noise. Every single time.